States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, can I please have a motion to move the agenda to the table? Motion from Tammy, second by Tracy. All those in favor? That passes, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 0. Can I have a motion to move the staffing appointments to the table? Moved by Mark, second by Bill. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 6 to 0. Item 2.02, can I have a motion to move the GTA MOAs to the table? Can someone please make a motion? Bill, second by Tammy. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 6 to 0. Item 2.03, can I have a motion to move the settlement agreement to the table? Moved by Tracy, second by Bill. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 6 to 0. Item 2.04, can I have a motion to move the changes to the 22-23 non-union rate sheet to the table? Motion by Tammy, second by Tracy. Any questions or comments? Yes, go ahead.
Just have one quick question on this. I just need to know the difference in we're adding a new position, it looks like, and it's a community schools and parent engagement specialist. Can just explain, do we have anybody here? Yes, okay. We're adding it. What's the reasoning for adding this to the district? Just give me a little bit behind it.
The two positions that are highlighted in there are that we changed was the substitute stock handler. And then the second one was we went from student worker to student tutor. It was the change.
Okay.
You okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
any other questions? All those in favor? That passes 6 to 0. Item 2.05, can I have a motion to move the coach work inactivity resolution to the table? Tammy, second by Bill. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 6 to 0. Item 4.01, budget update, Superintendent Groutman.
I'm going to invite Mr. Kalili to come on up and give us an update of where we are with our budget.
Thank you. Got a couple items we're going to cover tonight in our budget update. One, I wanted to cover our couple state aid adjustments that we've made since the last time we did a budget update. Also, there were several budget adjustments since the February 7th meeting that we wanted to make note of, and then provide the board and the community with a draft budget summary at this point in time. So starting with the state aid, what I did is added a couple columns to the far right that say new. The columns to the left are the columns that were brought to the board beforehand. If you look at column 2, the executive state aid total for us came to $151,192,000. Since then, there were 2 adjustments that we made to that. One of them is noted at the top under the new column under far right. Our foundation aid adjustment was slightly adjusted downward by $8,900. That was based on a new February database run that SED did, State Education Department did, and gave us a foundation aid number of 106 896 as opposed to 106,905. Small adjustment there. The other adjustment is in the building aid, and it's highlighted in the green for 12,751,000. The original governor's budget was 11,613,000. We met with our financial consultants, gone over all the building projects that are out there, and we've increased the building aid projection for state aid by about $1.1 million, primarily due to projects that we know in phase R4 and R5 that will have final cost reports submitted to the state in time to generate aid during the 23-24 school year, but the governor's office would not have picked that up in their database run from back in November. So we are increasing building aid by $1.1 million, and we believe that will be aid that will be coming into us for a total of $12,751,000 as opposed to $11.6 million. Based on those two adjustments, everything else stayed flat. We increased our state aid by an additional $1,129,000, which brought our total state aid to $152.3 million. The last time we spoke about rollover was on February 7th. We had gotten our increase. We were balanced at that point in time. However, you'll see in a subsequent slide, we had some outstanding items that we were there. We've now reviewed those items and distributed them through the budget, plus there were some other changes that you'll see on subsequent slides. But this is where we were, $290.3 million as of February 7th. As we continue to put together the 23-24 budget, these are just some considerations typical of what we've been doing each and every year. Items we consider as we're doing it: commitment to the strategic plan. We still need to finish up staffing to actuals. That should be completed by the end of the month. Those still need to be factored into these numbers. Financial conditions, the appropriate use of reserve funds. At this point in time, we're still using approximately $1 million out of the reserves, and we will probably keep that around that level. Externally, we're still waiting on the legislative budget. As of today, there has been no legislative budget issued. We're not sure what the numbers that the legislature will issue to us compared to the governor's budget, but as soon as those come out, we will make those adjustments as necessary as well. Board of Education input and feedback from district personnel in the community, all items that we take into considerations as we're putting this together. So on the revenue side, what I tried to do is highlight the items that did change. The variance here is, for the revenue side, is what the change was compared to the adopted budget for 22-23. So first is pilot payments. It's highlighted because last time when we spoke March 7th and we did the debt service presentation, we had used pilot payments. The amount we used was about $1.5 million. Since then, we have adjusted that number down based on our estimated rate that we believe was to ensue at the time that we did this. So our pilot payments came down slightly to $1.4 million. The state aid number, 152.3, is the number we just reviewed on the previous slides. The levy itself increased from 122.2 to about 122.3. That shift is from the decrease in the pilot payments to an increase in the levy. Debt service reserve, at the time we did this back in February 7th, we left the debt service and the capitalized interest the same at $1,079,565. We have met with our consultants. The new debt service reserve amount is going to go to $1.1 million, and we do not need capitalized interest of $565, so that's been removed from the budget. Our new revenue number for 23-24 at this point in time is $290,752,050. One point I did want to make, which was, until I really was kind of looking at this, the increase in our revenues from 22-23 to 23-24 is approximately $25 million. Of that $25 million, which is a big number, 91% of that is due to state aid. Okay, I mean, almost 23 million of that 25 million is revenue we're getting in state aid. So I just wanted to make that note. If we look at the consolidated categories here, basically it's just a consolidation of the previous screen. No real significant changes. The one point here I wanted to make is in 22-23, our state aid amount represented 48% of our revenue. It now represents 52%. And our levy represented last year 45% of our revenues and now represents 42%. So we are, fortunately or unfortunately, a little bit more reliant on state aid now since we've gotten the increases than we were in the past. Taking a look at the expenditure side, what I tried to do is give a snapshot on this, what changed since February 7th. And that's what the variance column here represents. So if you look down the second column, 22-23 rollover budget, 27-23, you'll see we had the rollover numbers that we reviewed at that point in time. And we had an allocation at the bottom that actually said staffing and other items that were staffing requests that had come in that we hadn't taken a look at yet, and other requests that had come in that we hadn't been able to take a look at. That was approximately $1.9 million, almost $2 million. That gave us the total budget at that point in time of $276. We have since reviewed all those requests, approved them or not, and have distributed them within now the third column, the revised budget. Okay? So from February 7th, if you look at salaries and wages, they went from 137.3 to 139.5, an increase of 2.2. And the variance column, again, is the variance between the revised budget and the February 7th budget. Staffing, there are some additional positions that we'll bring forward at the next board meeting that we have made recommendations on. Social Security, TRS, ERS are related to those additions. Health and dental premiums, again, related to staffing positions. Benefits, other, same thing. The debt service number, you see a decrease of about $1.3 million. That, again, is after consultation with our financial advisors that our debt service was not going to be almost $20 million. It's only going to be $18.5 million. Again, that gave us a revised number of $290,752. If we look at the categorical summary of them, salaries are up. Now, this is comparison to the same budget last year, the adopted budget for 22. Salaries are up 8.8%, or about 6.7%. Equipment's up $400,000. It's it's almost 50% increase, but we have made an intentional decision to increase our equipment budget from about $500,000 to $1 million, given the size of the district and the needs of the equipment portions of the budget. Contract services and supplies up $5 million, along with tuitions. In charter school and private school tuitions are up $1 million. The contracts and supplies, that is really kind of unique to 23-24, in that there are still supply chain and inflationary concerns. So those numbers are probably higher for 23-24 than they will be hopefully for 24-25. But there are contract and supply increases in there of 15, 18, 20%, especially for B&G and transportation type items in fuel. So it's a larger increase than we typically have, but we believe we've covered everything. BOCES services up $3.3 million. Benefits up about 6.8 or about 9%, and then interest and other expenses down a little bit, giving us, again, a balanced budget of 297.52. As we look at the revenues and the expenditures, we are currently balanced, awaiting the legislative budget as it comes out. The next slide was just a slide to give folks an idea of why the budget sort of, how's it gone from $265 million to $291 million. This is the breakdown. You can see salaries are up about $8.8 million, retirement 1.6. The bracket there represents 14.4 million of the increase is directly related to staff-related costs, salaries, benefits, Social Security, retirement, and those types of items. We have a BOCES increase of 3.3 million. You can see equipments and supplies are up 5.3, a slight decline in our debt service, and this is just a waterfall slide to show you how we get from 265 to 291. Now for the interesting portion of this. So this is our draft summary of the budget for next year, again, at this point in time, and it may change when we get the legislative budget out. The budget, the operating budget, again, $290,752,000. The budget-to-budget increase is almost 25 million, 9.39%. But I do want to make a point that of the 25,000, 91% of that, $23 million, is state aid. That's money they're giving us because they owe it to us from years past. Of the 9.39 budget increase, 8.6 of that 9.4 increase is due to the state aid increase that we've gotten. Okay, we're not going to give money back. They're giving it to us, we're taking it. We now are adding staff and other expenditures to support our student needs. Our estimated levy at this point in time is 122,366. It's a change in the levy, an increase of about $2.2 million, or about 1.87%. When we met on February, or maybe on the debt service, so last board meeting, March 7th, the levy change was 1.76%. It's now 1.87%. That is, again, due to the shift between the pilots and the levy. The 22-23 tax rate per thousand is $24.84 is what was approved for the current year. At the time that we originally put this slide together, based on the numbers that the preliminary numbers in a conversation we had with the town of Greece, we had estimated that the tax rate for '24 would be somewhere in the range of $22.25 to $22.66, or a decrease in the rate of $2.18 to $2.59, or somewhere between a 9 and 10.5% decrease in the rate. We prepared this slide, we sent it out to the board, and it changed. And then it changed on Monday, it changed again. So what we did to try to kind of capture two scenarios that could come about is estimate number one is providing that the town of Greece submits their new assessed values. So if you recall last year, the town typically does a third of the district every year in their reassessments. Last year, they did a third of the district, and it was right in the middle of the huge housing price increases that we had. Those were submitted to the state. The state rejected them and indicated to the town that we cannot do this for only a third of the district. In order to make any changes, you need to do a town-wide reassessment for next year. Town of Greece did do a town-wide reassessment for the current year. We used those numbers preliminarily to come up with estimate number one. What we learned yesterday is they may not submit that town-wide reassessment to the state. I'm not certain as to why, or whether they can or can't, or how it works. But if they submit an estimate number one, if they submit it, the state still needs to approve it. And we believe if it would get improved, possibly would get approved, and we'd be in that range. If they decided not to submit it, and the town of Greece held them, we came up with estimate number two, which basically says for 23-24, take the current year levy, the $122,366,735, and divide it by last year's assessed value, updated for new home sales. If we do that, rather than having a decrease in the rate, we could see an increase in the rate of 1.5% to 1.92%. The rate could go, if they do not submit the reevaluation to the state, it could go from 24.85 to 25.21, or up to 25.32, 1.5% to almost 2% increase. We are not certain at this point in time where they are going with it. As we know, we will make the adjustment, but I wanted to be able to lay out both scenarios of where we think at least the end goal polls on if they submit where we could be, and if they don't submit where we can be. My gut says there's a lot of things that could happen in the middle. We're not privy to them. We'll just have to wait and see where that is, but I think we cover the gambit on either scenario.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Mark?
Mr. Corley, just help me understand, thank you, Debbie. The tax levy is, we've got an estimate there, that's established. I'm wondering about, we've got a May 16 vote. What's yet to be determined is what the rate is, but the levy, do we have any concerns about what we will be able to bring to the vote? Is that up in the air as a result of this, or is it just?
Not at this moment. As we get closer to May 16th, yes. So to me, I'll say there's two marking points. One is when we present the superintendent's recommended budget. There's still opportunity to make a change there. If we don't know and we have to kind of stay here, then I think we have till the 18th, until the board has the opportunity to adopt the school budget. If it goes beyond that, I've never been there, so I'm not sure what happens after the board adopts if we still don't have an idea of what the rate or a confirmation of what the assessed values will be. Now, technically, the town of Greece does not finalize their assessments until July 1. But it's always, this is just new territory. In our conversations with the town and with us, it's just new territory. Everything has always been pretty consistent the last 15, 20 years until we got to last year and this year, where no one's really certain whether the housing market is going to stay where it is going to continue to increase, or is it going to continue to drop? It's their function to make that determination and come up with what the assessed value is going to be. But that is where I think the challenge is, and we will stay on top of it. And my hope would be by April 11th, we will have a rate, a good rate, to be able to provide everyone. And then prior to us doing the superintendent's recommended budget, we would do an update of anything that has changed here as a result of either the legislative budget coming out, which typically would be out around this time, but that could go as late as March 31st, and anything that the town of Greece would change or do for the assessed values. At this point in time, I'm not worried, but I could be in 10 to 2 weeks.
So wait and see.
Yes. I know it's not a great answer, but
Anybody else? Tracy?
Romeo, could you remind me, please, tuitions for private, public, charter? Could you
I'm sorry?
Do you have your mic
Oh,
on?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Could you remind me, please, about the tuitions, private, public, charter, the million, the variance, the 7 million? You know, I think I know, but I'd like to hear it again, please. Thank you.
Tuitions, yeah, so those have gone up. So we pay tuitions to private placements for special education students, private settings or other public settings, and we pay charter school students that live in Greece but attend charter schools. We have to make payments to them each year. We believe both the number of kids in each of those tuition categories and the increase in the rate, because they're also subject to the same inflationary cost increases that we're seeing, resulting in an increase of about $1 million, primarily on the rate, but also with some additional students either attending charter, public, or private placements.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Does that include, like, busing and lunches
No.
No.
and books, or none of that?
That is strictly the tuition that they bill to us.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Romeo.
Thank you.
Item 4.02, perception survey presentation. Superintendent Groutman?
Yes, Dr. Zaffetz and Dr. Baker are going to come on up. Just to provide a little context for this presentation, we have a strategic plan that indicates multiple metrics. And we've been really intentional through the years to ensure that there are numbers and like key metrics that we might be able to gather, for example, with achievement data, but that we're also gathering softer data like perceptual data. And that goes to not only this particular set of data that we're going to be talking about tonight, but also how much we value hearing and listening from our families, from our teachers, and from our students. So we find a lot of different ways throughout the year to gather data that could be through thought exchanges, other surveys, parent exchanges, student exchanges, all those kinds of things, to try to get a sense of what people are thinking and feeling. The perception data that we've started years ago is actually a more formal way for us to gather some of that, to be able to then triangulate that with other achievement data and other sources of data so that it helps us with decision-making. So I share that just from a context because it's not a random presentation. This is actually data that gets used on a regular basis in our schools. And Dr. Zaffetz and Dr. Baker are going to give us a little bit, not only because we finally have the data, they'll give us some highs and lows that we were able to gather, and then also just more information in terms of how it's used. So thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We presented a little bit on the the perception surveys during the mid-year strategic plan update. I had a request to go a little bit more in depth, so that's what we're going to do tonight. In particular, Christine is going to take us through a little bit about the development process of the survey, the development of the questions in a little context, a few results and themes from each stakeholder group, as well as implications for our practice and how we plan to communicate those out. So Superintendent Groutman just mentioned that we value stakeholder voice, and that is definitely the case. But also, in addition to our values and our gut feelings regarding the importance of stakeholder voice, research has also proven that prioritizing stakeholder perceptions and integrating those into your work really can move all the different areas of the REACH strategic plan. So in particular, with Commitment 1 for Ignite Learning, brain science tells us that learning for understanding happens when we integrate new knowledge with our existing knowledge. So the perception surveys and the answers to the questions that are provided by students and families in particular can really help us to leverage some of that when we are integrating these into our school improvement plans and into our instruction. For cultivating trust, it really is a focus on relationships, and learning as much as you can about relationships can help to promote positive relationships between students and staff and administrators, and then schools and families as well. And it can really also give us a way to uncover root causes for some of the issues that we see and we deal with as challenges in our work. So not only do we have just kind of the numbers of some of the challenges, we can also try to get to the root cause and really attack that rather than just take our best guess as to what's causing the issue. And as far as expanding opportunity goes, this really has to do with the unique lens that's brought to the work by the students. If you don't take the time to kind of really dig in and uncover their perspective and their perceptions about their school experience, you may, again, kind of like the previous example, be working through, barking up the wrong tree, for lack of a better term, to try to really provide the most appropriate supports to build on student strengths and then also help out with some of the challenges that we see too. We also prioritize getting information, two-way communication back to our stakeholder groups as well. So Christine, when she takes you through, is going to close with some creative ways that we've thought to bring the information and the actions that we've taken as a result of the perception surveys back to the community and back to the board. And that is going to be a focus of ours going forward in the spring with our 22-23 results. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christine to take us through the presentation.
All right, so what we hope to share with you tonight, beyond what Dr. Zaffis has already shared, is how the survey was developed, the timing, who gets these surveys as far as the audience, what we learned from each of the surveys, just some general highs and lows, as Superintendent Groutman mentioned, and then how we're planning to take action. So we give the survey annually. So we've been doing it since around the 2016-17 school year in a consistent way. We have done perception surveys before that time, but not necessarily in the same rhythm that we've been doing. And so we've landed most recently over the last few years on the time frame of January 3rd to February 17th. Over time, we've given it in the fall, we've given it in the spring. So this is just where we've landed over the last few years. And we try to do that because we know that perceptions change depending on the time of year that you ask. And so we try to at least remain consistent so that we know that we're comparing as closely as possible the perceptions at a specific time of year. We just moved the platform in which we give the surveys. So what we did last year was we did an audit of all the different ways we're asking for specific stakeholder feedback. And it took a long time, a whole year. We started with asking all of our departments, how are you asking for feedback, and to which groups are you asking for that feedback? So for example, our Leader in Me schools gave what's called a measuring results assessment, and that was always given annually in the spring, and that was given to staff, students, and families. Then, in addition to that, we were giving a perception survey, and then there was other pockets of places that we were asking for feedback from stakeholders. And so we tried to say, okay, if what is really important that we want to know from each of these surveys? And so we looked for examples from the recommendations from the State Ed Department, from existing platforms that we were utilizing in different formats, such as Leader in Me, and we tried to pull the questions that were consistent across those themes, like that were consistently asked. And then we also looked at different school improvement plans. We took a dive into all of them to say, what are buildings paying attention to? What do buildings want to know? And then what do we want to know as part of our district comprehensive improvement plan? And so we triangulated all of that and went through and crafted questions and built it in the current platform that it's in now within Panorama. So it's housed within Panorama, but we built the survey based on a group that was working together in the district improvement team, and we had different stakeholders sort of look at the questions once we had them developed and gave feedback on those questions. We also really wanted to make sure it was aligned with the strategic plan. So as we were developing the questions, we sort of put them in buckets. What questions are we asking that are going to help us know how the learning is happening within our schools? What questions are we asking that's going to get at more of a climate? And what questions are we going to ask that are going to get at opportunities that are available to different stakeholders? So the stakeholders that we were looking at were really family, students, and staff. And so we developed 3 different surveys that get at these different metrics. The scale was basically, the majority of the questions were on a 5-point Likert scale. And so when you'll see going forward, there's a positivity score. And that's based on anyone who answered a 4 or a 5 around agree or strongly agree to questions, or sometimes it's reverse scored. So if if a question was, I feel afraid that I'm going to be bullied, for example, we want them to disagree to that. So the 1 or the 2 would be actually the favorable response if you answered on the other end of that. So that's what factors into the positivity rating score. So as Dr. Zaffitz mentioned, there's different forms of data that we're looking at. So this actually goes into the MAP data, where we're actually asking broad questions on that Likert scale that give us a starting point. So you'll see that there's probably going to be lots of different questions that come up around why maybe people are feeling a certain way that they're feeling. So if someone answered a certain way, we might want to know more about that. And that will sort of get into the action steps in terms of how, this is just a starting place, is that MAP data, and then we want to get street level data that are typically in the form of interviewing or focus groups that actually help us dig down deeper. So we'll talk more about what we've been doing in order to take the survey data a little bit further. We were really intentional around making sure that if we asked something around igniting learning to staff, that we also had something similar for staff and students. So we tried to at least triangulate across the board so that those themes, we weren't just asking random questions of just staff and then never asking a similar question to a different stakeholder group. So the alignment across the topics are all connected to igniting learning, cultivating trust, and expanding opportunities so that we could bucket those related to the strategic plan. So you'll see these areas of focus of, do you have choice in your learning, or do you feel your child has choice in your learning? Or if you're a staff member, do you feel like you're providing your students choice? So that's just as an example of the same question, but tailored towards the audience under Ignite Learning. Same thing with cultivating trust under voice, relationships, and collaboration, and then expanding opportunity. What are the resources or access that different stakeholders feel they have access to? So what we heard in the survey, we had almost 2,000 families take the survey. We had 6,200 students take the survey and 889 staff. So the survey was only given to students in grades 2 through 12. So the survey isn't given to kindergarten and first grade students, just for various reading level reasons. And some of our staff are reading these questions to some of the students at the younger grade levels if they're in second, third, fourth grade. We have intentionally tried to increase our families who are taking the perception survey. We had it in several different languages this year to try to increase that rate. And we also have an incentive that we're trying to do raffles for with some of our community partnerships for giving us their voice and taking the survey. So our response rate over the last 2 years has been relatively consistent, but we've seen an increase so last year and this year was stagnant, but from the year before that, we saw an increase once we started doing some of those incentives and creative ideas. So we hope that that continues to improve. So right here, you'll see the first layer of igniting learning and the number of favorable responses overall. So this is the buckets of questions in these categories. 84% of families responded positively around the questions related to Ignite Learning. 75% of students did, and 90% of staff did. So we'll get into what some of those questions, examples of those questions, but just overall, pretty positive results overall in terms of igniting learning. Same thing with cultivating trust. You see similar scores, 78% overall positivity rating for families, 72% for students, 82% for staff. And then expanding opportunity, 82% for families, 84% for students, and 83% for staff. So what does that look like? What does that mean? So in grades 2 through 5, they had a different survey than the students in grades 6 through 12. There were just maybe higher level or more detailed questions and a few more questions on the 6 through 12 survey, but still aligned in that same way that I mentioned before. One example of a question under igniting learning, my teachers encouraged me to do my best. 97% of our 2 through 5 students agreed, said strongly agree or agree to that statement. One of the lower scores for students in grades 2nd through 5th grade was, I am excited to go to my classes. 83% said they were excited. So you'll see that that was still a high score of positivity rating for our students in grades 2 through 5. When you get to 6 through 12, that shifts a little bit in terms of excitement. So only 29% of students in grades 6 through 12 are excited to go to their classrooms. But 86% of them say that the work that they do in class makes them think. So this is an example of something we might want to dig into deeper, right? Students in 2 through 5 are feeling excited mostly, and then something changes in 6 through 12. How could we learn more about that from students by getting them into a focus group to learn more around what's happening? Or how could we talk to staff? Or how could we talk to families around changes that might be happening? So that's just one example of how this map level data is only going to tell us so much. We actually have to talk to the people who complete the survey to figure out more around why. Because that survey is not going to tell us why. We have to do the work to kind of take it to that next step to figure that out. The family survey results, expanding opportunities. A high point was the work that they do, sorry, there's a typo there. The work that students are doing in class makes me think. 86% of families had said that they believe that is happening for students, and that students are excited to go to their classes. Actually, I'm feeling like this is shifted. Is that? It's like a repeat.
Yes.
So I think this is not correct. So we will figure out why that happened. I didn't catch that until now, so I apologize. But what we also had in addition to the family survey results that no other stakeholder group had was an opportunity to actually add in open-ended questions. And so it turned it into sort of a word cloud of around typed responses that families were able to put in terms of other information that they wanted to share with us. And so some of the hot words that kind of came up in those word clouds were around bathrooms, fights, values, consequences and discipline, bullying, and phones. And so that was typically around 6th through 12th grade families that were putting that in. There was around 40 to 50 responses that came in from those groups. And then for elementary, it was around 10 responses per school that were entered into that. What you won't see here is the specific results from the family like we pulled out in those other themes, but generally you saw those first few slides where it showed overall the scores were positive, but definitely highlighted some areas for improvement, just like the 6 through 12 students did. So the families showed some similar concerns around some of those areas. For teacher survey results, we asked demographic questions of who was, the only question we asked was how long they had been teaching, just as an interest to see who was completing the surveys. So you'll see here the number of responses by the number of years that they've been in the district. The results for cultivating trust from teachers is 99% of teachers said that they build positive relationships with others within the school. 47% felt that the school handled discipline and behavior problems effectively. So again, how do we figure out more around what that means for teachers by talking to them within the various levels to figure out some action steps on how to improve with that. So overall, some insights that we took from this is secondary students feel the work is rigorous but have less fun than their elementary peers. Elementary students responded more positively regarding culture and climate than secondary students. And staff perceive their instruction is engaging, while secondary students are not feeling like that as engaging. So comparing some of that to figure out what might be some disconnect between the different stakeholders might be. So what we're going to do is look at all of the information in terms of data. We take a look at what we ask our school improvement teams to do is if we find that students might be underachieving in a specific area such as math, we look at that perception data as another spot to say, what might be happening with instruction? If they don't see learning as fun and our math scores are down, could that lead us to something we might want to find more about from staff or from students? If people aren't feeling safe at school and teachers aren't feeling like discipline is effective, how might we talk to the stakeholders to figure out an action plan moving forward involving students and staff and families in that action plan? So data dives help us to do that, and focus groups and circles help us to do that so that we can hear some new ideas that maybe we haven't thought of. So one example that we're doing is at the Family Festival coming up in a few weeks. We're actually going to be running some focus groups and having some parents sign up so that we can actually generate some questions based on our district data to ask families to share with us as a follow-up to the survey around some things that we might want to learn more about as a district. Schools will do something similar in terms of asking things that they want to know specific to their school improvement plans. We're also going in and helping schools talk to students and running staff and student focus groups right now that are generated from these perception surveys. So, for example, we were just at Arcadia Middle this week and ran a student focus group asking some questions related to some of the perception data to try to better understand. And the last thing that we're asking principals to do is to help tell us what they're doing as a result of the perception survey so that we can share that back with you at the June meeting as part of the GASA comments, so that at least it's a quick snippet of some of the ways that we're using the data to sort of close the loop with stakeholders. Because we know that we collect this information and we don't always do a good job at sharing back with what we're doing, and that we're using it in a way so that people are more encouraged to continue to take the survey in the future. So that's definitely a focus for us, is to make sure we're closing that loop. And so hopefully you'll see more of our efforts and intention around that going forward. Any questions?
Questions? Bill?
I was just wondering, is there any way we could, as a board, can get a copy of the surveys?
Yeah.
You know, so we could read some of the questions and see for ourselves what's going on?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Megan.
Okay, so just a quick one. Christine, you kind of touched on that on page 8 and 10 regarding perception, and it can change. And I can tell you, we talked about this in exec session, when you walk in and you hear something and then all of a sudden your perception changed. So I appreciate that information first, because perception surveys are based on a self-rapport per se, which can not always be accurate in the way, and not always provide honest responses. Parents and students and staff may feel that they're not encouraged to provide accurate or honest answers due to retaliation, which is totally not acceptable anywhere. Not saying that we do, just saying that. Surveys don't always capture a full range of what's going on, which you did touch, because it can change your perception from spring, fall, and anything in between. The surveys also are designed for flexibility, which can also misinterpret the results that you get. So those that do or don't take the survey, it may not reflect the options and behaviors of the entire population under the survey, which you did touch on. 1%, you have that box that they could put anything that they want in, and we got 1% back. That just doesn't give us a whole response as to what is really going on, which then you'll have to dive deeper. So I look forward to that. So that was kind of my question. I mean, how do you, besides diving deeper, what else can we do besides doing these perception surveys? Because you're not always going to get the fair information that you need. Besides diving deeper, I mean.
So can you help me better understand maybe what you're wondering?
What I'm wondering is, normally, I get you can only go by what you get. But unless you get 100% participation, you're not going to get everything that you need. So you did state that during the spring, and it's not really a question, it's more of a statement for you. So I do appreciate the fact that you are going to take that time for the spring and talk to these, the parents regarding this, because this does need to dive deeper. I can't imagine, and I guess we'll go to answer your question here. The page 8, let's go to page 8 here with this perception surveys here. We are on the rates. There's 100 pieces of paper here. Okay, so students in grades 2 to 5, they're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. So teachers, yes, I hope that they're encouraging their students, and I would assume that they are. And our 6, 7, and 8, 9-year-olds, are they excited to go to school? They absolutely are. So that seems as if that's good. And you've got 97%, and you've got 83. That's a bigger result that you can. Obviously, the reading levels you can't give to a first grader in a kindergarten, like you said, and the comprehension, they're not going to understand really what climate and culture means to ask those questions. I do get that grades 6 through 12 are going to give you a different perspective. Do they like the working class? Not exactly. Are they excited to go to school? Not exactly. But that's something definitely you'll have to dive deeper into, because that is huge. It's low morale. I mean, that could have everything to do with the grading, reading, responsibilities coming now from teachers, staff telling kids kind of what expectations are, can change a whole bunch of things. As far as, that's kind of it. I just kind of wanted to make a statement with all of this, especially with the teacher survey results. I am glad that they're building positive relationships. That's why we're all here. The problem that I see here, which we don't have a good number, and you did mention this, and again, this is going to require a much deeper dive. We've got 53% that strongly disagreed with the students' discipline and behavior, and that is a huge issue, obviously, that we're seeing. So, in all, I'm grateful that you actually are going to dive deeper, and we definitely need a bigger understanding of what these surveys are going to entail, because this is a lot, and this can go further into many other things, code of conduct issues, like I said, literacy issues. So thank you for doing this. This was a huge presentation. It's kind of my overall comment, questions are all in one for you.
I want to add one point just to get to that. So I think it's really important, number one, it's one piece of data that we use. And a big part of the presentation really talked about the point that we do is we take that and then we go deeper with focus groups and finding other ways to dig in to find out if the perceptions are accurate or what else can you tell us about something. But I also just want to caution us, because you can't have it both ways, meaning you can't sort of say perception data isn't helpful and shouldn't be used and can't be trusted, but then pull out the 53% on behavior and say that that matters so much. So I just caution us, because we're using the data because we do believe there's value in perception data. And in those ways, no matter what, whether you believe everybody was perfectly honest or not, there's some lows there. So it was really clear that teachers did feel that way about behavior and discipline in schools. So we're going to go with that. And then we're also going to dig deeper and find out more in the same way that we might go with that with some high points. And then the other part that I want to point out is we're using it also to compare. So if there is a perception, if a teacher feels like my classroom instruction is so engaging and all the kids are saying something different, then that should tell us something. There's more that we need to find out there. So I guess my bigger point is there's nothing perfect about perception data. It's one kind of data that we use, and we compare it with other forms of data like grades and other things to then help us with bigger decision making. And I think that you did a beautiful job in terms of really sharing sort of that next steps in terms of what we then do with teams and how we use it. And I would also applaud us, because I can say that there are most districts in this county, region, state, nation that don't bother or they give it once a year and it kind of sits on a shelf and really nothing's done with it. And I think what we're trying to do is honor the voice of our students, our staff, and our families. So, thanks.
Mark?
So I don't know how to interpret how good a score is, and I guess for me, what would be really helpful is what do the trends look like from year to year? So if you have a 70% favorable, is that good or is that not so good? So if it's coming down from 80, not so good. If it's coming up, really good.
Yeah, so we, as part of the updates around the strategic plan, you saw the trends just for cultivating trust, because that's a specific metric, so you can see last year's scores to this year's scores specific to that measure. We didn't look at Ignite Learning and Expanding Opportunity in that way. We probably could, because the questions are different. They're not exactly the same, whereas Cultivating Trust's questions were most consistent from last year to this year. So we were able to bucket it that way. So hope going forward, we will absolutely monitor the trends from year to year. Now that we have the survey built in the platform, it will allow us to look holistically at the scores by stakeholder group. So that's exactly why we organized it this way, so we could see those trends.
Great.
Can I add one thing too? We're getting a lot better at integrating these results too into our school and district improvement plans as well. So a lot of the schools are identifying specific perception survey questions that align with their goals. Basically, like which responses to the questions, if increased, would move towards the spirit of the goal. And so schools individually have been tracking their survey results too, so that they have I'm just saying because they have a benchmark to work from to improve as well.
Anybody else? Tammy?
Thank you for taking the time to put all this together. There's a lot of information here, without question. I know from being one of those parents that are kind of middle of the road that it's really hard to get people to answer these surveys. And you look at the amount of people that responded versus the number of students and families we have in this district, and it kind of goes to show that you guys have put a lot of effort into trying to get people to respond to this. And I'm expecting also probably the same people respond over and over again. So we only have a certain population of people. But that being said, I'm curious, and I know that questions have changed in that over the years, of the qualitative information that you have, like the bathrooms, the fights, the values, the consequences, and discipline. How does that if I'm putting you on the spot, please tell me if this is a bad question, because I know it's hard sometimes to have information off the cuff. How does that compare with previous years? Are these same topics coming up year after year? And out of curiosity, if we know that that's happening or if there are things, are those focus groups specifically, or do we have like a target program or committee or something that tries to address those? And I'll give you just a touch of background. The reason I ask is because at my own company, we have employee perception surveys that we fill out every other year. And when they have numbers, they essentially have to put committees together based on the qualitative information, target words that are there, and they actually put things into place to try to address the things that are brought up, and some of them are the same year after year after year after year. So I'm kind of curious where this falls for us and how we're handling that.
Yeah. So we've never asked a qualitative question on our perception survey before. So this was our first year to do that and to try to get more information, knowing that we have a smaller amount of families who are responding, so we put in an open-ended question. This was the first time we did that. So I can't compare the themes, but we hope to going forward. I think that's an interesting thing to look at. And then as far as how we utilize that, we sort of funnel it to departments that make sense at the district level. So we just had a Culture and Climate Committee meeting yesterday, and so we were using some of the themes from the perception survey to try to speak to that during our meeting. And so other departments will sort of look at that as part of around instruction, what is this telling us, so that we can make sure we're infusing that within existing committees, and then buildings organize that the same way. If we find that, though, we need to have something created, we have ad hoc committees that could form to take a look at a particular issue. We've done that in the past.
Perfect, thank you.
Anybody else? John?
So one question just around So you get all the data from all the schools, right? I'm curious, right? How does it compare across schools, right? And what I mean by that is like, how does all the high schools compare against each other and the middle schools compare against each other? And I'm not asking like, are they the exact same percentage, but are they in the same margin of error? So that's part one of the question. And then part two is, I'm guessing you're gonna tell me it's a little bit different, right, and it varies, right, and there's pockets of improvement. I know you're gonna have focus groups, et cetera. How are you gonna drive those best practices from each of those other buildings into the ones that need the help so that we can see better results next year?
Yeah, great question. So I would say generally you see secondary are within a certain range and elementary are within a certain range, but there are outliers, to your point, around some that sort of pop up, whether positive or maybe in areas for improvement. And so we're having those conversations as we do our school improvement meetings. We're in a cycle where we're showing up and we do walkthroughs and we're having targeted conversations. We also have PLN structures that help us to sort of learn from each other as we're going on visits. And we intentionally will cross-pollinate, some information. Hey, you scored lower here. We want to connect you with this principal over here who's doing this work. Let's sort of take what they're doing. That could be an idea that we're generating. Let's bring that back to your school improvement team. Same thing with discipline. I mean, that was a lower score from teachers at the code of conduct meeting that we just had, the last meeting. Was it this month? I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, when was it? Last week? I don't know. We intentionally will do that where we are grouping principals so that they're learning from each other, and teachers are part of that meeting too, where they can take back ideas in terms of next steps that they're going to bring back to their buildings. So that's just one specific example within one specific area of how we're doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, did you have a question?
Yes. On page 10, you provide that template of how the scoring is done per question. I recall receiving a summary of the teacher survey maybe 2-3 months ago, and we didn't get any statistical information on that. So I was wondering if it was all qualitative questions, but I see later on in the deck there were this type of question. I'm wondering what the statistical data looks like, and not just for that, but I think that would be helpful information for the board as a whole to see. So Mr. Maloney asked, can we see the questions? I'd love to see the questions. I'd also love to see the full data set that comes back. Can we receive that information?
Yeah, we have that for you.
Could that be just like when we do the surveys, the board is included in the results of it?
Can you tell me more? I don't know how they.
Just that we would receive the results of it.
We could include that in a memo. I mean, I guess it certainly, we always have the structure of the mid-year strategic plan update, and then we have the annual, which we'll do in the summertime at the retreat. So either between one of those, or if it falls, because this falls at a little bit of a unique time because it's after mid-year, we could provide it in a memo. Certainly.
That'd be great. I mean, okay, full information, yeah, thanks.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. On to business action. 5.01, can I have a motion to move the 2023 annual legal notice to the table? Tracy, seconded by Tammy. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor. That passes 7-0. 5.02, change orders. Can I have a motion to move the change orders to the table? This time, the change orders are $57,577.40. Can I have a motion for the change order? John, seconded by Bill. Are there any questions or comments? That passes 7-0. Business information. This is written information only. 6.01, are there any questions or concerns on the budget status report? Okay, anticipated bids, 6.02, any questions or comments? Consent. And I have a motion to move the consent agenda to the table. Tracy, seconded by Tammy. Any questions or concerns? And finally, Bill, oh, sorry. Oh, vote. All those in favor? Sorry, 7-0 is getting a little anxious to the next one. Bill, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I can like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second by Tammy. All those in favor, that passes 7-0. Thank you. Have a nice evening. God, I